You've probably been hearing about General Motors and some of their V8 engines catastrophically failing. Huge amounts of recalls, lawsuits, people now skeptical to buy the brand, whether it's the 5.3, whether it's a 6.2 liter L87, there's been no shortage of problems. So you could ask the question too, how is it they're able to build a reliable V8 engine and package that in the Corvette? I mean, the Corvettes haven't been exactly problem-free, but it's been more related to a transition to a new platform, the transmissions, which is something new to the brand, but the engines themselves, some of the new 5.5 liter V8s that are flat plane cranks, and even the 6.2s and the base engines seem to be somewhat reliable. So what's going on with these trucks? Well, what we have is a series of different models, of course, all within the GMC and GM platforms, Chevys, Cadillacs, ranging anywhere from 2021 to 2024. There's been a whole plethora of issues with their engines. Recalls, NHTSA's got their fingers on the pulse, and a lot of buyers are now very skeptical. When you see J.D. Power's giving it the green light for some of the most durable, most reliable trucks, where's that coming from? It really begs the question, where are they getting their numbers? Where are they getting their stats? And it doesn't take long to start searching the internet to find all of the problems that General Motors has had. We can talk also about the cylinder deactivation issues they've had. Even their 5.3 liter V8 engines have been very problematic. The lifters, of course, related to the variable valve timing, have had catastrophic failures. Unfortunately, recalls have addressed the 5.3s and the 6.2s related to the cylinder deactivation and bad lifters. And in some cases, the recalls would address complete engine swap, but in most cases, it's just tearing down the tops of the engines. In some cases, customers were even on the hook. Customers that would drive it outside of warranty, and all of a sudden they later on find up, exposing themselves to some catastrophic engine failures. But what's the latest? The latest is we're hearing, of course, problems not just with the 5.3s, not just even with the Turbo Max and some related issues there, and not even necessarily with the Duramax diesels, but it's now the L87 V8 engine, the 6.2. You ask, how can GM get this so wrong when they've been building it so right for so many years? I've even got people on the inside that said, they're really skeptical to even buy a new GM truck these days because of some of the troubles that they're going through. Now, what we're hearing are there's a lot of problems that are starting to surface. Huge discounts on the car lots. We're seeing massive discounts, anywhere from $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 discounts on the price of a lot of these brand new trucks, L87s. They're piling up, and in a lot of cases, people are just skeptical. There's actually a lot of long-term owners that are deciding to go buy a Ford, try something new, maybe Stellantis and some of the Rams, because some of these L87 6.2s. Now again, anything from 2021 to 2024 is a potential risk. And we're hearing recalls, anywhere from 877,000 recalls for bad engines. Well, what's bad? Well, bad is potentially catastrophic. I'm going to share with you what I've learned about this because there's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of assumptions, and a lot of people are either just diving off the proverbial GM bandwagon, and there's a lot of people that are saying, no, it's just noise. But there is in fact a reality, and allegedly there's already been dozens of collisions related to some of these engines piling up. Of course, losing motive power and then crashing. There's apparently, allegedly, also been as many as 40 vehicle fires directly related or attributed to the fact that some of these engines have failed. So what's going on, and what's GM's overall fix for this? Well, there's been a few issues, and we're hearing now some of the latest information isn't just the fact that you're hearing crankshaft intolerance or the tolerances of the crankshaft main bearings or journals, but also the rod bearings have a contributing factor. The crankshaft as well as the connecting rod have all been contributing factors. But there's new conversation that's emitting. And now would you believe that there's certain vehicles, they're saying about 600,000 recalls directly related to a swap on the oil viscosity. Many of these vehicles are getting addressed with engine replacements, but many of them are getting replaced just getting an update to the oil viscosity because General Motors has come out initially, these vehicles came out with an oil viscosity rating of 0.20. 0.20, obviously, the viscosity, the thinness or the thickness of the oil. Now, there's all kinds of technical mumbo jumbo as to why, the viscosity is more important than, at one level than another. But the bottom line is a thinner oil, for example, like a 020, the 0 is the cold temperature, the 20 is the hot operating temperature. A thinner oil is definitely going to have a less of a lubricating impact on an engine than a 040, which now coincidentally General Motors is updating on certain vehicles. And while a lot of buyers of some of these 6.2s are driving around in these vehicles of that generation are asking, why didn't I get that recall update? Because in fact, that's right. Not every owner of a 6.2 L87 is getting the update to a 040. Only certain engines are getting that update. How do you know the difference? Well, there's a lot of different stories being told. But one thing is, what they're finding allegedly, according to some of these problematic engines in the L87s, is a tolerance rating of the journals of the crankshaft. The crankshaft, of course, then housed by the bearings, the rod bearings, which of course in turn operates connecting rod. But it's that bearing materials wearing down prematurely. Of course, it creates an excessive amount of heat and then catastrophically fails and piles up. But in some cases, what they're doing now, there's a couple of things that there's a procedure that GM allegedly is coming out with. So what they're doing is there's two parts to this recall. One is they're going to look at the vehicle, do a general inspection. But what is that inspection? Well, the inspection entails that they're going to take the camshaft, which is the upper end of the engine, which affects the valves and the rotation of the valves and the opening and closing of the valves. There's a ratio between the speed in real time of that camshaft to the crankshaft, which is the bottom end of the engine. Now, there's a rotating ratio. It's something like 2-to-1. Don't quote me on that. It doesn't really matter. But in real time, they're able to monitor the ratio and the deviation between the crankshaft rotation and the camshaft rotation. If this deviation spreads while they check this in their shop in real time, then they know they've probably got an issue. If they've got an issue, supposedly the latest news is they're going to swap out the engine. Now, a lot of these are mandated if they're new vehicles sitting on the lot. That being said, what I'm being told, and so-called experts in the inside are saying that you don't necessarily go through that procedure if you've got an existing vehicle in service. That being said, a lot of people are just going through this and with the expectation, you better check my truck out. I don't even know if I'm comfortable driving this thing. But there's a deviation because the assumption is if you've got a bad rod bearing, which is a contributing factor to many of these failures, you're going to see a movement. You're going to see a deviation between your crank and your camshaft. You're going to see some movement in there. And that deviation allegedly is potentially, they're able to see that deviation. Now that means they're likely going to replace that engine or go further inspection and move it along. Now, allegedly, the second part to this has to do with if, in fact, the deviation is fine and they're having no issues and everything rotates properly, there's no strange noises, everything's smooth and everything operates as expected and intended, then the expectation was to move you to the second phase, and that's updating your oil viscosity. Originally it was 020, so now they want to talk about putting in a heavier grade of oil. They'll likely upgrade your oil filler cap to actually replicate or suggest that the updated number is going to be a future carry-on. Because the idea is obviously that you want to make sure that you can fix it now, but what about in 5 or 10 years down the road, assuming the engine even lasts that long, that the owners down the road, the second, third, fourth owner, is going to continue putting the right viscosity of grade of oil in that vehicle. Because ultimately a heavier grade of oil is going to do a better job against shear forces, load, speed, engine RPM, and all those other facts. Now, all of that oil viscosity is definitely going to have an impact. You ask yourself, why are car brands running this thinner grade of oil? We're seeing it almost every manufacturer out there running thinner and thinner oil. Well, this all evolves and comes out of a place where, of course, oil manufacturers are coming up with better products that do a better job of lubricating, do a better job of resisting high temperatures, heavy load. But same token, a thinner grade of oil means you can run a tighter tolerance, a tighter bearing, and in doing so, likely you're going to create a scenario of more efficiency, but ultimately they're looking to achieve less drag. more fuel efficiency, more efficiency in the engine altogether. But unfortunately, in doing that, they're undoing the reliability that they've enjoyed. Because when you think about GM many years ago, and people would quite often swap out, muscle car lovers or people that were doing hot rodders or updates, the LS engines were the go-to because GM made some of the best, most durable, robust engines. The LS engines were absolutely legendary. So how could we come so far this way and go so far the other way in terms of overall reliability? Well, some allege that these crankshafts and some of these reporting or some of these components were coming from outside of the country, allegedly from parts and manufacturers in Mexico. Of course, the tolerances were inconsistent, as were the finish on the crankshaft journals. So if you have an inconsistent, you've got a rougher surface that isn't properly polished, maybe the tolerances aren't in place. Now you've got bearings that are under excessive wear potential. You have bearings that are all consistent, but if the crankshaft journals are a different size and thickness, or even possibly a texture that may impose extra wear and tear on those bearings in short order. Now, other things to consider. What they're suggesting is do a quick oil change right after you buy a vehicle. I mean, a lot of engines, as they're going through the wear-in period and break-in period, we've seen this in lots of cases. Toyotas, Honda specifically has had 1.4 million engines recalled because of bad, problematic areas and retainers and crankshafts and bearings. We've seen Kia and Hyundai in their Theta 2 engines with catastrophic engine failures. A lot of that was attributed to bearing material or metal particulate. Look at Toyota with their 3.4s. Some are saying, alleged, that it's metal particulate. There's a variety of different reasons why some of these engines are failing, but one thing's for sure, there seems to be one common denominator that seems to constantly surface to the top. And these L87s have the same alleged problems. And that's metal particulate in the engines or getting in some of those lubricating surfaces. And getting that particulate, that machining material, whether it's some of the excess material from machining the engine in general or the break-in period, which does tear away excess material and usually gets flushed out, suggests that it's extremely important to get that material cleaned out as soon as possible. What do? You get a new vehicle, get it in there, put a few miles on it, and get it flushed out. Now, this is only my assumption. This is only my general practice. And I know engine builders that have been building engines on hot rod, high performance, turbo engines, Porsche engines, BMW engines. And what their practice is plastic gauging, making sure you have the consistent bearing thicknesses and wear and tolerances before you even turn the engine with ignition under its own forces, making sure you have the right bearing tolerances, making sure you're using the right oil, and also making sure that you're doing a quick oil change. Put a few miles on, maybe 1,000 miles, 500 miles, run the engine, flush it out, do another quick oil change. And the idea is to do a quick couple oil changes to get some of that material out of there. Valve seat, ring seat, everything starts to seat into its position. So a brand new engine, it's always extraordinarily important that that engine gets a quick oil change. Well, the way it looks with GM and some of these L87s, they're addressing, a different viscosity, looking at some of the consistencies in the crankshaft, and certainly deviations in the measurement between the cam and the crank. But at the end of the day, there's a variety of issues. And the one thing that there isn't is a confidence in the brand. JD Power, not sure where they're coming with their stats. But I'd love to see where this all evolves. For now, as an owner of, a Cadillac Escalade or a GMC or Yukon, Denali's, any of these vehicles that are utilizing the 6.2 L87s are at a huge risk and definitely going to have an huge impact on the sales and the bottom line for the brand. This is going to be a serious stain for General Motors. Can they get through this? Time will tell. It all depends how they treat their customers. I've heard of customers seeing excess amounts of oil consumption, 3 to 4 quarts between oil changes. Absolutely not negotiable. That's far too much. But one thing's for sure, if you're out shopping for some of these new GM vehicles, make sure you do your homework. NHTSA has their fingers on the pulse. And I definitely hope you hit that subscribe button, because that's going to help me grow the channel, share more buying information on the latest and the greatest. Hope to see each and every one in the next one, everybody. We'll catch you all real soon. Bye-bye.